Mavs. They got a big-time Game 5 win in Oklahoma City, giving them a 3-2 lead. I almost said 3-1. That would be wrong. But it was a 104-9, or was it 102-94, correct?
Correct.
Victory. Luka Doncic, a 31-point triple-double, and big shots knocked down by P.J. Washington, by Derrick Jones Jr., and that was important because the Oklahoma City Thunder defensive plan was, we're going to stop Luka with size. We're going to stop you throwing those lobs by peeling in an extra help defender. We're going to send 2 to the ball to Kyrie Irving, and he's not going to have anything there. They also made a big change, Oklahoma City did, in their starting lineup. They had started Josh Giddey for the entirety of his career there in Oklahoma City, and for the first time in that, he came off the bench in favor of Isaiah Joe.
Yep, and if you didn't hear it on the broadcast, Reggie, he came off the bench. They only shouted it out 75,000 times that it was his first time ever coming off the bench.
And so with that being the case, we're reaching Game 6 will happen Saturday, 7 p.m. if I remember correctly, at the AAC in Dallas. And the question I have is this series a solved series? And now you'll ask, Reggie, what does that mean, a solved series? I'm thinking of it like this. Have you played tic-tac-toe?
I have.
Tic-tac-toe is considered a solved game, right? And that is to say, if you make a move, I make a move, you make a move. Once we get to a certain point, there's an ending that it's going to hit to, right? Like no matter what you do, it'll reach a certain ending. And I think that back and forth, I think that within this series, the back and forth of adjustments between this is my game plan for Mark Dagnall, this is my game plan for Jason Kidd, this is my adjustment to that, this is my adjustment to that. That back and forth, that chess match of adjustments, I'm wondering, have we reached a point where there's nothing left? Because I texted a friend of mine when I saw that Josh Giddey move and he was benched. I was like, I think that might be Mark Dagnall's last adjustment that he has. And I could be wrong in that. But Blake, as another a fellow ball knower, does it feel like this is a solved series? Like what we have here, game plan wise, is already there, and they're just going to have to go out there and play it out based off these tactics.
Yeah, I'm glad you laid it out the way you did, because everything that me and Reggie are finna say are just outside looking in, what the game plan has given us, what we think of it. The players still going to have to play. We could say they got all this great stuff and they could get blown out by 30 tomorrow. They could win by 30. The players still got to play. We're talking strictly from a strategy and game plan point of view. I think when it comes to Josh Giddey getting taken out of the starting lineup, I think that's a great point. It feels like that was his last punch in the arsenal. It feels like both teams have thrown jabs. Both teams have thrown their punches in games 4 and 5 and got wins according. So I feel like if the Mavs really wanted to, they still have some couple different things in the chamber. I'm
interested. What do you think that those? Because that's what I'm wondering. Like
Or you think you have both teams empty the chamber and now it's just play ball?
Right. That's why I feel like we've reached that point. But I'm interested. If you still think that there's adjustments, I kind of want to get your feel on that.
I don't think there's any huge adjustments. Having Maxey Kleber out is obviously a big one. But I think we even saw an adjustment last game, which I tweeted about it. I've been on the show very adamant about it. I was elated when it happened. Dante Exum does not enter the game for Kyrie. Jaden Hardy does. I thought that was a great adjustment. You saw Dante Exum be very hesitant, not just this series, the entire playoffs. To really look at the rim, has been hesitant, has been, for lack of a better word, dribbling in circles.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something we've talked about, not just in this series, and I think you can attest this, right? Over the course of weeks, maybe months, I've talked about the fact that Dante Exum is a solid kind of additional ball handler in some ways, but when a team applies real pressure to him
and treats you like a first option, like we talked about,
he gets completely negated.
It was too much.
Because, like, not only does he not really look for a shot, he also can't really give you the ball handling and passing that you're looking for.
He's not as strong where he can dribble through a double, dribble through a pick and roll, and the guy's aggressively going over the top. And you saw with Jaden Hardy, as soon as he got into the game, downhill, pick and roll, scoring. He had 2 alley-oops, which I thought were the 2 biggest plays that he made all night. I think it was to Lively and Gafford, or maybe both Lively. But either way, 2 huge alley-oops where you just weren't really seeing that from your backup ball handlers.
And we hadn't seen that really from him before either. Like, one of the things we talked about, and I think it started in, Summer League.
Yeah.
Because they sent him to Summer League, and he ran the offense because they were trying to make him a true point guard. Can you do this? And it was like, oh, he can't be a playmaker. He made some plays in that game.
And so I have to give credit to that, and I'll put a cap on it with just, like, being ready. Like, imagine not playing the whole series. You're a young guy. You think maybe this is going to be my moment. I can make a big splash. You don't play until game 5, and you get checked, and all right, you're in for Kyrie. Kyrie's already been kind of struggling, too, so now I need you to give me a little boost. I thought it was a great boost. I thought it was a great adjustment by Kidd. But circling back just to both teams emptying the clips, I think we've seen the Oklahoma City Thunder, despite being the 1 seed, be the more desperate team. That's just my personal opinion. I feel like they've been trying to move the adjustments. We didn't see Chet and Big J Williams from Arkansas all year play together, not a single minute.
Right.
And they played already 20+ minutes together in this series. And that's to say, obviously, you got to try to change some things. Things weren't going right. But you're seeing Mark Dagnall be, all right, well, we got to try this. Let me throw Isaiah Joe in there. We got to try this. Different offensive schemes they've done. We've seen Jalen Williams not really get it going this series. So I do think Mark's a little bit more on the back foot, not just because it's a 3-2 series deficit, but just kind of the strategy they've gone out. We've seen the hack a lively. You would think maybe a hobbled Luka and a double-team Kyrie should be enough from a top 5 rated defense, but apparently not. So I think both teams maybe have one minor thing, but I think when you look at the grand scheme, both teams have kind of emptied their clips as far as strategy, and now it's just time to go play ball.
I have a question for both of y'all. I don't consider myself a ball knower, as y'all say. I know basketball a little bit.
If you listen to the Get Right, you can be a ball knower, man.
But here, I have a question for y'all.
Sure.
Obviously, this is the first time Hardy has played, correct me if I'm wrong, all playoffs, like at least meaningful minutes. Adding any player into the rotation at all, does that make it difficult on the opposing coach, no matter who it is? Just like, hey, this is a new guy. We have to scout this guy and maybe...
Oh, no. Like, this is one thing that you need to remember when it comes to the NBA. During the regular season, there's a little bit of advanced scouting, not really. When it comes to the postseason, your team has been scouted. Everybody knows what's happening out there, right?
They're ready for Omax to come in.
they know what all of these players provide, what they do. I mean, if you have the privilege to go to these games like we do, you see some of the scouts.
That's all their job is.
I was fortunate enough to sit next to a scout from the Pelicans in the first round, because the Pelicans were already making sure that they knew exactly not just what they do because they have the regular scouting, but what they are doing, right? Just in case if we get up and we move on to the next round, or we move on to the next round, we know what you're up to, right? And so they've scouted these things down. They know what's happening here, but what does that actually change when it comes to the alchemy of that series? I think it gets a little interesting, and those are the things that you feel out on the floor, because you can have, in theory, like just kind of the basic basketball theory of what happens. When you get on the floor and those things shift,
and it's live,
you react to what's happening live.
And I think it's interesting. They kind of touched on it on the broadcast, I believe, and I was kind of thinking it as well going into it. With taking Getty out and putting Joe in, you would think that's an upgrade because Getty has not been playing well. Joe has shot the ball particularly well in this series, been one of their better shooters. But it kind of maybe throws the flow off of Isaiah Joe, who's not used to starting. It's not out there with a different line. Now, Getty, who I think was honestly still fine off the bench, but I'm thinking more just when you mix up the lineups, you're hoping it's a good outcome, but you could translate negatively to both players, the guy that's going to the bench and the guy that's going to the starting rotation. So luckily for the Mavs, all their starting 5 has been pretty good, obviously. But even the bench guys that have come in have just played their role so well that there's no weird adjustments. There's not, I got to come in early for Luka. It's like or early for Kyrie. These guys are used to coming in at different spots and whatnot. And we've seen it get mixed up. Hardaway used to be the first guy off the bench all season. Then it was Josh Green. Then it was Derrick Jones Jr. when he wasn't starting. Then it was Lively. Like, it's been different guys in different positions. So I think Jason Kidd, as much as we like to give him grief, and we kind of talked about in the crosstalk when Eric and Brian were asking about us, they get all these minutes in the middle of the season where, why is this guy playing? And why is he getting extended minutes? Why is he coming in? And then when the playoffs come, Hardy comes in, he's ready to go. So I got to really give my applause to Jason Kidd and how he's handled the rotations.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the benefits of his style of coaching in the regular season of, I'm just going to try a whole bunch of different things, is that he has feelings for, at least you imagine, he has feelings for how those things work. And so this is you're reaping the benefits of that in the ways that this team, they stay ready and they play for him. And that obviously is something that you have to give him credit for. But when you talk about some of the adjustments, I also think it's worth keeping in mind that when a coach makes adjustments in their rotation, it's not just to see if those players can play better. In some ways, that's part of it. It's also to see if you can change the way that the game is played. Can you force something to happen from the other team? And that particular change with Josh Giddey going to the bench and Isaiah Joe starting, I think because they did not make the Mavericks pay. Isaiah Joe didn't. Even though Josh Giddey happened to play better, it didn't work for them.
It wasn't an overall net improvement.
But I also don't know that necessarily absolutely makes the change a wrong one. And that's the tough thing, because you're playing a 7-game series, which is more than, like the NFL playoffs. It's still relatively limited, and it can just take a poor shooting night or poor shooting nights, which the Oklahoma City Thunder have had, for good approaches to look bad. And likewise, right? So that's the tough part about the coaching aspect and the game plans of it. But more than anything, it feels like we've seen a lot of moves, and I for the most part, I actually kind of like a lot of the decisions that have been made over the course of this. But I think we've gotten to the place where now it's just, Luka, can you show up and play well, right? Can Derrick Jones Jr., can PJ Washington knock down shots and make it so that the defensive plan that the Thunder are throwing out there, everybody has to pick your poison. That is the poison that they pick. Can you deliver that from the Mavericks? I don't know that there's another switch in this one yet.
I'll ask you this. What has been your favorite adjustment by both coaches throughout the series? It doesn't have to always result to a win. Just a favorite adjustment you saw, like, okay, I like what they're doing. For me personally, I'm a steal from Iztok Franco, who we love from D Magazine.
He's so good. If you don't follow Iztok Franco on Twitter, if you don't check him out on D Magazine, you're really missing out on one of the best analysts of this Mavericks team.
And he makes it very palatable. It's really easy to read.
Yeah.
But one thing he noted, and I saw watching the game, is usually you have your center be the screener. Lively, Gafford, big screen. Then you have the lob threat, pick and roll. We all know that from growing up. But what they've been using is Derrick Jones Jr. was 1 of 8 coming into last night's game from the corner 3. So they said, let's take him out of the corner. Let's get one of those big guys kind of in that short roll, kind of that dunker spot, keep PJ in the corner. And we're going to use Derrick Jones Jr. as our screener. And now he's the guy in the short roll making those decisions. And it paid dividends a lot in that game. So I thought that was one of the better adjustments that we've seen on the fly. And he ended up making his threes later and did his thing. But just in the short roll, I thought he was awesome, kind of having a little bit better of a decision maker rather than Lively and Gafford kind of fumbling the ball at the nail.
So you want me to keep it to the series, or can I go entire playoffs?
You can do whatever you choose.
All right, I'll try and keep it to the series because that's what we're talking about here. I think that in the start of was that game 3 where or it might have been game 4, but I think it was game 3 when the Mavericks came out and they started it understanding that, hey, Luka is not playing well. Kyrie Irving started the game with the ball in his hands, and they started with a 1-4 pick and roll with Kyrie Irving and PJ Washington, and they hit that same play probably about 3 possessions in a row.
That was game 3. It was the first game back in Dallas.
And it was just pick and roll. Immediately, PJ Washington, easy dunk, because they did not anticipate that. And what that did was they started PJ Washington off going very well and getting him the ball in that mid-range area where he plays incredibly well. Yes, he's knocking down these threes, and that's evident. But when he gets into that mid-range where he can put up that floater or where he can kind of use that touch, that he has really great touch around the rim, I thought that was a great way of activating a guy that you needed to be a scorer in this series, especially when you didn't have Luka Doncic playing well. So that was my favorite when you talk about from the Mavericks
anything from OKC?
Perspective. OKC's perspective, I think it was the smart one where they stole the game in game 4 with playing big, putting Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren in that series. Playing at the same time to make sure that they got rebounds that the Mavericks should have been getting.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that. The Jalen Williams, I was talking about this with my mom, who's also loves watching the Mavs. Jalen Williams won't necessarily fill out the stat sheet, but I just like his game. Backup J. Will. He just knows his game, knows I'm a 3-point threat, has a nice pump fake, plays decent interior defense, and having him and Chet in there is kind of a weird combo in your head, but it just kind of works for them in short spurts. So I agree that was a nice little improvement and adjustment for when the Mavs obviously aren't going to roll Lively and Gafford out there on the same time. So you're just going to have that height advantage, and they were getting offensive rebounds, and you're like, because Chet doesn't really play like a traditional big. A lot of times you'll see him standing down on the 3-point line, defense and offensively. He's not really honing in the paint where Gafford and Lively take up so much paint space. So Mark Daigneault, Coach of the Year, he's definitely had his chops cut up for him
He's called
series.
A lot of stuff. They went to the hack of Lively early. Like he's thrown some stuff out there. And I guess the one that I really, really liked wasn't actually an adjustment that was like one that they made. It was a reaction or a regression because they started this series trying to take away the lob. In game 4, they tried to overreact and cut the water off, as they said, against PJ Washington, and that allowed the Mavs to go Dunk City early on.
PJ 0 at half, but you're winning.
Right, and then in the second half, they were like, okay, well, we've got to go back to
PJ.
We've got to go back to try and peeling in. So that was a good adjustment, but it was a reaction to, oh, I messed up and trying to change that. Yeah. So yeah, I think that this is a solved series, man. But I think that what that leads to is who's going to hit the pressure points that are available there. And I think the comforting thing, if you are a Mavs fan, is that the pressure points that are there for the Thunder are Are they going to knock down their shots when they get these driving kicks? And thus far, they haven't. Again, 4 games in a row where they've shot under 33% from three. They hadn't done that all series or all year long. Are they going to break out of that? I think that's less likely than looking over at the Mavs, and the pressure points that they have is Luka Doncic going off, which he has shown you that he's done in this series. It is Kyrie Irving maybe turning it on and knocking down shots. He hasn't. But then it's also the others knocking down those shots that are open for them. And you've had literally all of those dudes show up. When you talk about PJ Washington in a big way, you've gotten Josh Green in a way that has not been, talked about a ton.
Great offensive rebounds.
DJJ knocking down shots. Like all those others that the Thunder are like, if they knock down shots, then we'll have to just deal with that. The Mavericks have done that. So I think of the guys that are just like, hey, now you go and play the game, the Mavericks have been the ones that have actually been doing that thus far, and so you think that they continue that on.
Mavs been making them pay, as a 972 and a bunch of other phone numbers point out. It should be called the live hack for hacking lively.
All right.
I like Deca Derek.
Deca Derek, okay.
Yeah, saw that on Twitter.
All right. I'm so attached to the Hack a Shack, that original, so I'm just gonna shoehorn whatever I can within that.